of March here in Phoenix, and it is the beginning of spring here in the desert. Most of my roses are getting ready to bloom here with the warmer weather. This particular rose, Distant Drums, here next to me is blooming already, but the rest of my roses have not yet bloomed. However, I do have some other flowering plants in my garden. A lot of these plants do bloom earlier in spring, earlier than my roses, and most of these guys are just once a year bloomers, just like the ladybinks behind me. She only blooms once a year in March, but when they do bloom, they do look very good. So I did want to show you some of the other flowering plants in my yard, in my garden, and show you kind of some of the other plants that I have been enjoying while I have been waiting for my roses to bloom. So typically in my yard, the first thing that blooms is these ladybinks roses. It's not a true rose, but they do call it a rose. This has been blooming it probably starts about beginning of March to put on buds and bloom. The ladybinks only blooms once a year, so you really have to enjoy it now while it lasts. And it does typically put on a really, really pretty show of blooms. I also have this mint here growing really nice now that it's springtime. And the fairy's kind of surrounded by all of these little blooms, clusters, big clusters of blooms. So this purple orchid tree is also starting to bloom here in March. This one blooms a lot longer than the ladybinks will. This will probably bloom into April. So here they are. They grow in these clusters. They look really pretty. This tree does lose its leaves, however. You can see the leaves here kind of from that tree. This particular purple orchid tree will also, these flowers will turn into pods and the pods will shed everywhere. So this tree is quite messy, but I think it's so pretty. To me, it's worth it. So I also have a citrus tree that starts blooming beginning of March. It smells really good. It's a very large tree, so it fills up the yard with a really nice fragrance. I look forward to this one blooming every year. I do also have this star jasmine vine. This one is just getting ready to bloom. You can see it's got the little buds on it. This is another one, once a year it'll bloom, but this does smell really good when it blooms. So another thing to look forward to in the spring. Some more flowers blooming in the garden are these wildflowers. The African daisies actually come up in winter and they bloom. You can see they're still blooming. They bloom for a good 3 months or so. I really like the African daisies, and then also the California poppies. The California poppies don't come up till later. They need some of the spring warmth to get them up, and they've just started blooming now. So wildflowers are always nice to have around in the garden. Another wildflower that I have blooming, I believe this is a snap pea or a snapdragon, it's one of those, one of the snaps. I had it, I think this is its second year. It's grown much bigger. It's been blooming probably about a month or so, maybe a little bit more. Just putting on these really interesting looking blooms. You can see the shape a little better here. Very pretty color. Another item that is blooming in the garden, I do have this wisteria. This is another one that is a one and done. It's kind of disappointing. I think this has the shortest bloom life out of my garden. These bloom for what, a couple of weeks, and then that's it. But they are super pretty. They're super fragrant, and I think worth it to have. If you do want something that's gonna flower longer or all the time, I would probably not choose this, but it is a really nice little accent, I think, to my yard. This guy is a white wisteria. This one bloomed earlier. This one bloomed before my purple one. It looked really pretty, but you can see there's not many blooms on it left. So they don't bloom that long. They kind of bloom and then go to put back foliage. This little guy is a pink jasmine. I actually had to replace this pink jasmine from when I planted the other one last year. This guy is also blooming right now. This one smells fragrant, quite fragrant as well. And this is another one that unfortunately, once it's done blooming, it is done blooming. So over here, I've also got this kale plant that I didn't expect to do so well. It's getting out of hand. I'll have to have a kale salad for lunch. And then back behind that, you can see I've also got some rosemary. Planted over here with the rosemary is some lavender that's blooming as well. And this basil sprouted up from seed. It didn't do very well, so oh well. So the lavender not only smells really good, but it also, this one does like continuously bloom throughout the season. So this one has fragrant blooms on it quite often.